Hello. I'm not sure that you can all hear me. I can't see you, but I'm hoping that you're there and that you're having a good conference. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the idea of techno-progressivism, which is an ideological theory that we've been developing at the IEET and in other quarters to try to pull together some of the political ideas with some of the ideas about futurism. I think that this idea actually has quite ancient roots. It's rooted in some of the earliest aspirations of humanity, that as soon as we began to imagine a better world, we began to imagine that it was possible to create better bodies and better societies. We began to try to think about what it meant to be healthier, to use the medicines as they developed over the millennia to give us greater strength and wisdom, but also how to have societies without hunger and war and with greater prosperity for all. And these aspirations were often reflected in mythological and religious terms, with ideas about how we might, after death, be constituted in a more perfect city in the heaven or in the afterlife, and have immortal bodies. When the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, occurred several hundred years ago, these ideas became expressed around ideas of secular progress, the idea that we could have a more perfect society through human beings coming together through reason to establish a community without hierarchy, one where there would be democratic accountability and individual liberty, and also that we might be able to use the new tools of science and reason and technology to perfect human life in various ways, to overcome the necessity to toil, to overcome sickness, and eventually even death. And these ideas then formed a nexus that continues to this day around various utopian aspirations. Utopian aspirations which are sometimes expressed in religious terms and sometimes expressed in secular terms. In terms of the contemporary transhumanist or futurist movements, there's a large rationalist faction in Western futurism, but there's also religious folks who express these ideas in ways that are consistent with their faith. And that also goes back to the Enlightenment. Many of the Enlightenment thinkers believed that the rational examination of God's work could eventually reveal God's plan for humanity, and that there was no conflict between human beings having scientific and rationalistic aspirations for perfection and God's plan. The political aspirations, however, have gone in two very different directions. There's a wing of the Enlightenment that argues that market relations are the central way for people to democratically organize their affairs through contracts. And then there's a wing of the Enlightenment that has focused on democratic rights and citizenship as the central organizing principle of political life. And that has created the left and right wing versions of Enlightenment politics. There are folks who argue against government regulation, redistribution, and so forth, and there are folks who argue for it. In terms of 20th century Western politics, and this is not as true in the developing world where there are many other religious and cultural factions and aspirations that have divided polities. But in terms of Western politics, we can think broadly of two factions or two axes that have created political life. And one is the cultural conflicts over Enlightenment ideas, over sexuality, the role of women, nationalism, religion, and so forth. and the axis of this political left-right division of market versus state, or equality versus contracts. And what I have proposed in the past is that technology, the emerging technologies, is creating a new axis in our politics, an axis around which people are more or less techno-aspirational or techno-optimistic or techno-pessimistic. Some of the issues that have created this new axis are things like genetic engineering, which we just held a major meeting about here in Washington, D.C., to determine how we're going to try to regulate and anticipate the issues around human genetic modification. But there are also issues around the nature of the person, who is a person with a right to life in our society. The debates over abortion, the debates over brain death, the debates over animal rights have all raised some of these questions about whether it is most important that you are a human or whether it is most important that you are a thinking being. This is also one of the issues that's at play in techno-progressive politics. But there are many different battlefronts. There are areas of conflict over control over reproduction, birth control, and so forth. There's issues of conflict over the fixing of disabilities, whether deafness is a disability that should be fixed or not, and over human enhancement. At this meeting in Washington, there was a strong debate over whether genetic therapy should ever be used to provide enhancement of the human being beyond the normal human range, or only therapeutic applications of these technologies. There are debates over the extension of life, whether it's a good idea for human beings to live past a normal human range of life expectancy. We have now in the Food and Drug Administration in the United States a trial of metformin, which is a drug for diabetes that is being explored as a therapy for aging itself. And the Food and Drug Administration and most regulatory agencies around the world aren't prepared to regulate and to deal with therapies which don't directly treat a disease or a disability, but are prophylactic against something as fundamental as aging. When we have even, I think, the most important set of fights over how we control the brain and who should control the brain and when, issues around whether we are appropriately treating depression and attention deficit disorder, mental illness. I see someone's coming online. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, great. Shall I continue?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So I'm going to mute you, I think. Maybe you should mute yourself because you're coming through on my microphone. Hide, mute. Oh, I did it. I muted you. Okay. So some of these issues, these conflicts in the United States began to become more mainstream political conflicts in the 1990s, and with issues around human enhancement. Hello, good to see you. Is everyone else seeing me? Let's see, I'll unmute you. Okay, I've successfully muted you, so I'll just continue. In around 2003 in the United States, the issues became part of mainstream politics with the President's Council on Bioethics and other groups beginning to, hello, beginning to coalesce what we call a bioconservative point of view around opposition to human enhancement and to genetic engineering and the applications of nanotechnology neurotechnology, psychopharmaceuticals, to human enhancement projects. And the debate between the techno-optimistic or techno-progressive wing of the politics and the bioconservative wing became much more prominent. Francis Fukuyama famously said in 2004 that transhumanism was the most dangerous idea in the world, and many people agreed with him. So we have since then seen quite a diversification of political ideas, with some folks on the left being both for and against these technologies, and folks on the religious communities being for and against, and some of the fulfillment of my own prediction of the full flowering of the various varieties of this kinds of politics. The term techno-progressivism began to gain currency in the latter part of the 2000s, about 8 years ago, and growing numbers of futurists began to apply it to themselves, and actually a plurality of Western futurists are classifiable as techno-progressives, of liberals and leftists of one sort or another. But the most visible wing of American futurism have been folks from Silicon Valley, who tend to have a more libertarian, market-oriented set of political ideas. And people like Peter Thiel, who's a major both philanthropist and multi-billionaire in Silicon Valley, have had enormous influence on the political thought and direction of futurism and transhumanism. Folks around the Singularity University, singularity being an idea of that we're approaching some kind of secular rapture, that there's going to be a major rupture in human history once greater than human artificial intelligence is created, and that opens up different possibilities for a human future, some of which may be catastrophic and others of which may be millennial. But in any case, most singularitarians have an elective affinity for a libertarian set of ideas that they don't believe that government and redistribution will make much difference in the human future. There are folks who have begun to experiment on their own bodies, people we call grinders, and do-it-yourself transhumanism. And those folks also tend to be quite suspicious of government intervention, government regulation, because they think that they themselves can chart a course to a better future with their technological experiments. We've had a new presidential candidate announce himself, Zoltan Istvan, a transhumanist who's running for president, who's tried to navigate these political waters and articulated an increasingly bizarre mix of libertarian and reactionary and progressive ideas in his political campaign. So things have become quite interesting. I think that both for the developing world and for the developed world, that the nexus of ideas that we've been exploring as techno-progressivism is increasingly the important set of ideas that need to be promoted. In particular, that technological progress has to be universally accessible, that we have to make sure that, for instance, enhancement technologies are accessible to all and not just to the wealthy. And that means technology transfer to the developing world, as well as universal healthcare systems having these technologies as a part of their armamentarium wherever they exist. We need to focus on the creation of anti-aging therapies so that everyone can survive into a future in which these kinds of technologies can be universally accessed. We need to make sure that cognitive enhancement is universally accessible, because it's quite possible to imagine that if only a minority of a population has access to radical improvements in intelligence and ability, that could create an exacerbation of inequality in society. We need to make sure that our societies have robust regimes to ensure the safety of drugs and technologies and their efficacy. We have a long history of medical quackery and people being sold snake oil, and this is a large problem in futurist medicine. And we also have issues around who and how we share the risks of innovation. It's clearly not equitable for only the poor or people in the developing world to be the experimental guinea pigs for new technologies. So we have to carefully navigate the safety and efficacy of these drugs and who has to bear the burden of experimentation. Finally, I just want to talk about a little bit of the political future of how we put together a techno-progressive coalition. One of the issues, I think, is reaching out to the existing communities of human rights activism in the world and articulating the ways in which technology are central to their struggles. Women, of course, around reproductive rights have long mobilized for access to birth control and abortion around the world as technologies that are important for their self-empowerment. But they haven't thought very much, or the women's rights organizations haven't thought very much about genetic self-determination, whether being able to determine the genetic characteristics of your children is as important or equally important as a reproductive right as the timing of your family planning. Disability rights, there are many in the disability community who are suspicious of the human enhancement movement because they think that it's ableist and attempting to create a society in which disabled people will be increasingly marginalized. And I see it quite the opposite, that we share a common interest in technological enablement. Many disabled people want access to wheelchairs and to other technologies which will allow them to live fuller lives, as do we. We may disagree about whether parents should have the right or obligation to ensure that their children do not have disabilities. Some people in the disability rights community consider that to be a eugenic project, and I disagree with that, and many people do. But still, there are many grounds on which the futurist and transhumanist community can be in solidarity with the disability rights community. Around the ecology movement, many in the ecology movement are suspicious of techno-enthusiasms that they think will distract from the need to critique technology's effect on the world and to move away from harmful technologies. We have disagreements around things like nuclear power, whether nuclear power is a necessary part of the solution to climate change, which I think many futurists have come to the conclusion that it is. But we can agree that technological progress in creating sustainable crops and technological progress around sustainable manufacturing technologies with nanotechnology and new sources of energy. So these are all a part of the solution. So I think that there are many ways in which the techno-progressive political idea can be developed and be a counterweight to some of the right-wing influence within futurism, and also address the needs of public policy to be more anticipatory of the issues that are emerging in the future that many people in public policy do not take seriously yet because they don't have an accelerationist technology perspective. They think that things like artificial intelligence are so far in the future that they don't have to worry about the risks, the catastrophic risks, or the risks of technological unemployment that may result from the advances in these kinds of technologies. So those are some of the areas in which we in the techno-progressive movement have been working. There was a meeting a year ago in Paris where we issued a techno-progressive declaration, and many organizations signed on to that. I think in the future, increasingly, we need to reach out to folks in the developing world who share this nexus of interests around futurism, public policy, and ensuring universal access to technology, and create a global techno-progressive movement. So hopefully, your meeting in Nigeria will be a step in that direction, and I wish you success. And I'll be happy to answer questions. I'm not seeing how to quite do that here in the Google platform, but I'm online with Mr. Omowole on Skype, and so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I see Stella's online.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. James. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my question is this. What are the possibilities of these new technologies for people who are, who have issues about health,
physical health? Well, I see a continuity between the technologies of the past, the growth of scientific medicine over the last 100, 200 years, and the technologies that we're developing in the future. But the things that we're working on now in the realm of futurism and medicine have mostly to do with tissue engineering, using stem cells to create new tissues to repair broken parts of the body, nanorobotic applications and nanomaterial applications in the body, so figuring out ways to complement or intervene in processes like the immune system with nanorobotics and nanomaterials, and eventually to come up with drugs and gene therapies which will stop and even reverse the aging process, because the aging process is the principal cause of disease and disability around the world. So all of these therapies, I think, I see as continuous with the project of medicine, scientific medicine, that started 150, 200 years ago, and will soon yield quite radical benefits around the world.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. James.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Dr. James.
Hello.
I want to ask, can this process be done before if you find out that the child is physically challenged in the mother's womb, can the process be done before the baby is born?
Well, there are some therapies which have been attempted in prenatally. There's been prenatal surgeries. Of course, any attempt to do a surgery through the amniotic sac is quite risky and can potentially cause a miscarriage and other problems. So the best way to deal with prenatal genetic anomalies is to intervene before the conceptus is underway. So to intervene in the sperm and egg, but if the parents are carrying a genetic anomaly, to fix the sperm or the egg, or then to create a conceptus at 8 cells, 16 cells, and change those cells before they develop into a body. And those are quite possible. For most people around the world, it's expensive and difficult to undertake in vitro fertilization. So really the ideal scenario is to change the sperm and egg in the mother's or father's body before the conceptus is created. That's a very controversial idea, because if we do that, then that child will carry in every cell of its body that modification. And that's called germline genetic modification. That, in fact, was one of the central issues being debated in Washington for the last couple of days about whether there should be an international convention against germline modification, because those modifications would be inheritable by all future generations of that child. Now, I think that after birth, we will have increasing numbers of tools of correcting various kinds of anomalies. Cognitive developmental anomalies like Down syndrome we may be able to fix in the future. Spina bifida we may be able to fix, etc. So I think that it's very hard to change a fetus in the mother's womb. It's a lot easier to do it before it's created or after it's born.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hello, Dr. James.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, sorry. I want to know in the case of a child in the womb who is a sickle cell carrier, and you know that we are all scared of this, as in this kind of a thing, whether here or outside of this place. So I want to know, as in, of what use will this technology be of use, I mean, to the parent or to the child in the womb, so that this sickle cell stuff in the child will not like follow the baby out when the baby is like mature. So it won't cause a problem to the family.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get my question.
No, I have, yes. So sickle cell is a great example because this debate over germline genetic modification and inheritable genetic modification assumes that we may make mistakes, that if we fix something in the current generation, that future generations may determine that it was a mistake to have fixed that. I consider sickle cell anemia to be an excellent example of something that, although there is one area in which it appears to provide some benefit, the selective resistance to malaria, the idea that some future generation may determine that it was a mistake to remove sickle cell anemia from the gene pool is pretty far-fetched and pretty extreme. And if we ever did decide that that we needed more resistance to malaria, we have so many other technologies that would provide that kind of resistance. So I think, as I said in the previous question, the best way to remove a genetic anomaly like sickle cell anemia is for everyone to be tested for sickle cell anemia in an affected population. And for parents, would-be parents who want to have children, to get a gene therapy that would ensure that the children that they create do not have sickle cell anemia. It's very difficult to change it in the womb, but it's very easy, relatively easy to change it in the cells that create sperm and in the ova in a woman's ovarian tube. So I think that's the best way to go about it. Now, we also may be able to then fix sickle cell anemia after people are born. That's called somatic therapy, and that, of course, would help all the people who have sickle cell anemia already. But that wouldn't necessarily prevent it in their children. So we have to do both. We have to fix it in the people who have it today in their bodies, but also fix their sperm and eggs so that they don't create it in their children. Hello?
Okay, you are done.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thank
I hope you have a good
Yeah.
conference.
Hello, Dr. James.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. James.
Hello.
Okay, it's Emmanuel again. I'm asking a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question here. Currently, we have cancer cases in Nigeria here. A larger percentage of deaths because of cancer issues. I want to ask specifically your discoveries on these new technologies we have currently. Is there anything that can be done in reversing the cancer trend? Then secondly, I want to ask, what are the negative aspects or consequences that might occur when we use these newer methods of technologies that are being discovered currently? Are there any negative side or effect to making use of these newer technologies right now for healthcare?
Well, I think the principal risks from health innovations or from new health technologies are the unintended side effects, and we have to do very rigorous testing to ensure that we understand what those side effects might be. So with every drug, there's a potential side effect, and some pharmaceutical companies attempt to create drugs that don't actually provide very much benefit given the side effects that they create. That will also be true with gene therapies. There may be gene therapies that don't actually work very well. In fact, the Chinese team that recently changed an embryo with the CRISPR gene editing technology determined that the technology, even though CRISPR is far better than previous gene editing technologies, that the method that they were using to change the particular genetic disability in this embryo didn't in fact work very well and could in fact cause side effects. So we need to, no matter which technology it is, nanotechnology or molecular biology or psychopharmaceuticals, they all have side effects that we have to understand and critically evaluate whether the benefits are worth the risks. I think I favor allowing people to make a broad range of choices once they understand what that risk-benefit ratio is. Some countries are more conservative around that kind of risk-taking than others. But I think the important step is to understand what those risks actually are. And it's very difficult given the weakness of many government regulatory agencies and the strength of the lobbying on the part of the medical industrial complex. So we have to strengthen our government scientific agencies so that they have the capacity to do that kind of risk-benefit evaluation.
Thank you very much, Dr. James.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate it. The whole team says thank you, sir.
Great. Well, I hope you have a great conference.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
You as well.
Yes, sir. I want to say something. This is live of the thing. Let me see if it changes. Okay, you first it up. Yeah, what should?